geek. Talking baseball every week. Because they're Cleveland and the Geek.
And welcome to Cleveland the Geek, presented by Black Stack Brewing. They're now in the liquor store near you. We're going to talk about them later. I'm John Bonus, the Twins Daily. With me, Aaron Cleveland at the end.
You go to Costa Rica.
I go to Costa Rica.
And all hell breaks loose, John.
I go to the winter meetings, and then Costa Rica.
That was a while ago.
And
so we have ownership changes. We finally have the identities of the long-awaited 4 months, I guess, minority owners. So we're going to talk about that. But then within that, they sort of overshadowed that announcement with the announcement that Joe Pohlad was stepping down as executive chair, which is just a fancy word for guy who runs the team from the ownership standpoint. And his older brother, Tom Pohlad, is replacing him. And then that very day, they held Tom Pohlad's first press conference, which I went to. We're going to talk a lot about that, obviously. And then also, they made this is a very low bar. This is going to be a sad statement, but it's accurate. So I'm going to say it. They made their biggest free agent signing in 3 years.
Yes.
Now, you might be thinking, did I not see? Like, who did that? Whoa, maybe I missed it. No, Josh Bell, $7 million. That was it. So we're going to talk about that too.
Yeah.
We should note, so it's been a couple weeks since we did the free one because we're on the every other week schedule during the off season. But it has not been very long at all since we've done an episode of the podcast for our Patreon audience. We did, like you mentioned, a couple shows where John was live from the winter meetings.
Right.
Then we did a Josh Bell emergency signing episode. We did a draft lottery show. And then I just did a show while you were in Costa Rica where I had Tom Froming on as a guest / co-host. And we did 2 hours on prospect talk, hardcore prospect talk, nerding out about the draft stuff, the draft class. And then we talked a little bit about the ownership stuff too. So most of you guys are signed up for the Patreon. But if you're not, here's what I'm going to tell you.
Now's a good time.
Christmas, Hanukkah, New Year's, whatever you want to classify it as, end of the year holiday sale. We made, as of yesterday, I flipped the switch on it, I think, all year long, so 12-month Patreon subscriptions are 20% off. So you basically get 2.5 out of the 12 months for free.
Right.
And it applies to gift subscriptions. So if you are a listener, you want to give one to your brother, your dad, your aunt, whatever it is, you can give them and get the 20% off. It applies to new subscriptions. So if you're listening to the free show and you think, I've been wanting to get their Patreon too. They do so many other episodes. You can get 20% off there. And then also, if you're already a Patreon and you want to just switch from monthly to yearly, you're already listening. And you're already paying for it. You might as well get the 20% off. So all three of those options are available to you.
This is where procrastinating really pays off for you. Where you need to get a gift subscription for you need to give it a gift for a Twins fan in your life. You yourself don't even have a subscription to the Patreon. Go sign yourself up. Get them a gift Patreon subscription.
Sure.
It'll be delivered basically overnight. They can start with the minor league episode, the Twins ownership episode, the Josh Bell episode. All the archives are free. So once you're inside, so this is a good time to have procrastinated. You outsmarted the rest of us.
Yeah, no delivery required means if you're like me and you wait until the literal last second to get gifts for anything, this works perfectly because it just shows up immediately.
Are you waiting till literally the last second this year, by the way? Because I am. I'm like going out this afternoon to try and grab some stuff for Chrissy.
I am, in the sense that I'm not buying anyone Christmas presents this year. So, yeah, I guess technically that is the last second. So we mentioned, let's get into we're going to go heavy on the ownership stuff because John and I haven't even talked about this. John's been in Costa Rica. So Vacationing John Bonus, that's his nickname.
That's it.
Because I said when Tom was on, Tom Froming, I'm like, and in for a Vacationing John Bonus. And I realized that should just be your name. Like Pretty Boy Floyd or something like that. Vacationing John Bonus.
That's right.
Anyway.
Even when I'm not vacationing, I'm vacationing.
Right. It's more... It's sometimes a physical description, but it's more just a mentality, a state of mind. Vacationing John Bonus.
VJB.
Yeah, I like that. But let's talk first, before we get into the ownership stuff, about Josh Bell, who you mentioned.
Yeah.
That deal became official, I think, Friday. 1 year, $7 million in terms of guaranteed money. He's got a mutual option for next year. We've talked a lot over the years how those are basically meaningless. You never see a mutual option picked up. So consider it basically a 1 year, $7 million deal which is on the within the realm. I was kind of saying 8 to 12 million for that first base spot, and I was including Bell in that group. We talked actually a lot about him. I feel vindicated is not the word, but just sort of satisfied with the work we did or what I wrote about it
Sure.
heading into because I had Bell at the literal top of the list
Right.
of like free agent bats that they could get, in part because I think he'd be a good fit. Switch hitter, got some power. We'll talk about him more in a second. But in part because I was like, this seems like a real Twins fit.
Yes.
And
Right.
price point ended up being maybe a mil or two below where I was expecting, which hopefully they can use that money on other stuff, bullpen, let's say.
You're
Uh,
funny.
we'll see about that. Why? You don't think that's going to happen, John?
Well, we'll see.
What,
But
what do you,
the,
what are you
I
trying?
just think the Pohlad ownership thing really got you optimistic. If you think they're immediately like,
Oh,
hey,
yeah.
where we got a couple extra $1 million to spend on players now. Woo!
Yeah. Well, yeah. You know me. You're vacationing, John Bonus. I'm optimistic, Aaron
Yeah,
Gleeman.
that's
That's
right.
my
That's right. Yeah,
always, as
yeah,
always.
yeah. Sunny
Um,
side, Aaron Gleeman.
well, it is funny because at the time, I don't even eat my eggs that way. I'm so committed to skepticism, and I don't eat my eggs sunny side up. Any coffee they bring, glass half empty.
That's right. I only
So
want a half. I want a half empty glass of
yeah,
coffee, please. Yeah,
that's what I request at the
that's right.
diner when I
Yeah,
go there.
that's right.
Um, when at the Tom Pohlad press conference, which we're going to get into that, we're going to go through some of the quotes and stuff and see what caught John's ear too. But it was funny that he a couple different times, including pretty early on, he didn't say Josh Bell by name because at that point he hadn't officially signed. He had to take his
Right.
physical and stuff like that. But it was clear that's what he was talking about, and maybe a couple the Alex Jackson trade or something like where
Right.
he kept saying like it's clear by our actions the last couple weeks that we are flexible and we are willing to invest and we are going to try to put a good team on the field. And I wanted to be like, Josh, $7 million for Josh Bell? Like that's
Yeah.
it.
Right.
Like
That's
your payroll is 100 million. It's actually below 100 million right now. But it was funny, like in his mind, and he clearly had. We'll get more into this in a second, but like he had like notes in front of him, which I'm not
right.
making fun of him. I mean, anybody in that spot should have some notes, some
Right.
bullet points. I mean, I have an outline here for this dumb show. So,
Right.
but it was funny the things he would. It was clear in his mind, I think, or maybe they coached him up to do this where the Josh Bell thing, we're flexible, clear the past 2 weeks. He said that a couple times. He had a few things that he just sort of circled back to, or even if there was any like daylight in a question that he could link to one of his kind of prepared answers, he did that. Now, with that said, I'm not going to say I was like impressed by Tom Pohlad, but he's clearly much more confident, much more comfortable, a lot smoother answering questions, being on camera than Joe Pohlad. And I think, does that really matter? Not really. But what I think ended up happening with Joe Pohlad was the few times early on when he would go, and answer questions on the record, or he would do local news, or he called into CCO that one time from spring training. The pushback or the reaction to that was so overwhelmingly negative that he
Right.
just got to a point where he didn't speak this entire calendar year. And that's not completely foreign for billionaires who own baseball teams or other sports franchises. There are some who just are out of sight, out of mind. And honestly, that's not the worst thing. Like if you're investing in the team and you've hired people and you're, hands off and you're letting them run the team, I'm fine with the billionaire who owns the team never being in front of a camera. The problems, though, come, and this is the Twins situation, when you aren't investing in the team, when you're cutting payroll, when the team is unsuccessful, you have to be willing to stand up there and answer questions and at least come across in a way that doesn't make fans roll their eyes or
Right.
worse. And that I think is what Joe Pohlad struggled with. And I maybe had talked to Tom Pohlad once over the years, very briefly, but I wasn't really familiar with him much before, he answered questions for 45 minutes with maybe, I don't know, a dozen media members in the room, something like that on Wednesday. I will say, like, he stood in the pocket like a good quarterback. He answered every question for about 45 minutes, and then maybe 15, 20 minutes after, once people stopped recording, he talked a little bit more. he had some prepared stuff that he was clearly trying to get across, but he answered everything, and the answers weren't always satisfying. We know that from doing this for a long time, but they were certainly meatier than the average Joe Pohlad session, I will say, and I'm guessing that played a role in it because here's the thing that I think is we'll go over the minority ownership stuff and everything, but the one takeaway that I thought came directly from Tom Pohlad that was more revealing than I expected was him saying very clearly that Joe Pohlad was not into doing this. Joe Pohlad did not want to step down.
Yeah, well,
They phrased it as, now Joe understands what's best for the family and all that. But I mean, I couldn't help but think he clearly got shoved out. Now, maybe by the end, he was willing to, walk out instead of being shoved out. But this is clearly a situation where the family determined, and I started to wonder the new incoming minority owners, how much a part of this did they contribute to, where they've been dealing with both brothers over the last several months. And I start to wonder if they said, we kind of like dealing with Tom Pohlad more than Joe Pohlad. Can we make that happen? And who knows what the driving force was, but it's clear that Tom Pohlad, who's the older brother, who has been executive vice president of, Pohlad Industries or whatever it is for quite a while now, he felt like I got to come in and do this. Like I have to, I'm not going to make too much of it. He came in and saved the family or anything, but it's clear the family decided, and maybe some of the minority owners decided, like this can't continue with Joe at the helm. I have to come in here and sort of, right the ship, which from Joe's perspective, I'm sure that's very frustrating, disappointing. I'm not going to say it wasn't earned. I mean, their performance and on and off the field over the last several years, but also to have your older brother have to kind of come in and save things has got to add, little insult to injury.
Yeah, that was one of the first things that struck me about it too. And my thought process was brothers, man. Like,
yeah,
that is the sort of thing, like, if it wasn't, my first thought was, if it wasn't my brother replacing me on something like this, basically I felt the way he did it, he kind of threw Joe under the bus, which
that's interesting.
which is weird in that he was clearly trying to position himself as, hey, we should all love Joe.
Yeah.
But the way he did it was by throwing Joe under the bus. And you don't, if you were replacing somebody that was not, you didn't have a lifetime of history with, just somebody else who was running your organization, or you were just taking over an organization for somebody else that had been running an organization, you could have said all the nice things about him without saying, but boy, did he not want to get fired. And instead he made it very clear that he got fired. And I thought that's not, there's a lot of ways you could do that without kind of saying, he just wasn't doing the job. I'm here to do the job, blah, blah, blah. You don't usually see that in a pass off of a $1.5 billion corporation. That's not usually how it's handled.
Yeah. Okay. So you're right that he made like an opening statement.
Yeah. It was the very first thing he did.
And it was basically like, I just want to say what a good person Joe is and what a difficult circumstances he was in and how he's never wanted to do anything in life other than help the Twins win. And also he tossed in a couple different times. And you guys have been really mean to Joe.
Yeah, right.
Being the media and stuff. And now that'll fall on my shoulders. I will say, as he was saying that, at least the first couple times, it came across to me as genuine.
Sure. I'm sure it was.
But then he was asked, like midway through, 20 minutes later or something, how did this come about? And was Joe on board? And he said Joe was not on board.
Yeah.
And so, I appreciate him giving a real answer because those have been in short supply with the Minnesota Twins for a long time. But to your point, you could have phrased that a little bit differently.
The first thing you do when you figure out a transition plan is make sure that the people involved in that transition are taken care of one way or the other. And this was, it's like they hadn't, for all the talk about, hey, we're going to run things differently, we're going to connect with the fans, and a lot of that is about how we're going to be finessing the marketing of the Twins whether it is, this was the very first statement was one which was absolutely counter to that. It was, in fact, not that it was, the guy in front of me who happens to be my younger brother, kind of messed it all up, but here I am to come in and fix it.
But
And it was
but I
like,
do think in terms of what you're talking about in terms of the messaging, like first of all, that is the most obvious question. Why are you replacing them? It's very hard to dance around that in a way that doesn't make it clear that Joe Pohlad, in their mind, screwed up or mismanaged it. And then the other thing is if you're trying to get a message across to fans, which he repeated that over and over, like that,
yeah,
I would say was his number one talking point of we have to do a better job of communicating with fans, which is something we've talked about quite a bit over the last year or two, because I think they've done a bad job and it's getting worse and worse. So it was interesting to see that. But I wonder if that's part of that goal or approach, which is how can we, effectively convince fans that it's not just a different Polad taking over. One way to do that is to be very straightforward about how it all went wrong,
yeah,
why the change was made, why things are going to be different. Now, I'm skeptical that things will be different, but it's difficult, I think, to position it as kind of a new day, a clean slate, any of those things, without at least saying that the guy you bumped out, when there was, by the way, no indication that this was in motion. And in fact, I asked Tom Pohlad straight up, how long ago did you guys decide you were going to step in here? And he said a month ago.
right, yeah, right.
And so I think I'm not saying you're wrong, and I see some of what you're saying, but I do think it's a tricky thing to push your brother out or have the brother step down. You replace him, and then also want to get across to fans, hey, this is new. I'm not just a Polad. We are going to change things. We do recognize how bad things went. It's hard to do all those things and not have it come across as, well, the guy before me didn't do much of a job.
It's not that hard. I mean, it's not. You just say, listen, Joe, we wanted Joe to stay on and oversee us getting out of this debt and seeing this piece. And now he's got some other things that he's going to work on. We've got a lot of things that we work on we've got a lot of industries that the Pohlads handle. And, we really appreciate Joe coming in and taking care of this and getting us to this point. And now I'm ready to jump in. And whether it's true or not, that doesn't matter.
Yeah, but who's going to buy? Who buys that? We'd be having the identical conversation if he said that.
The other thing you say, as far as the messaging goes, you say, as far as my focus is going to be on really trying to connect with the fans. We understand that there's been some, my communication style is different than Joe's. I'm going to try and, deliver the bad news or, more straightforward answers or be more accessible than he is. Joe was put in a weird position. He couldn't be that accessible because of the sale over 14 months. That's not the sort of thing you can do out in the open. And as a result, we understand that fans feel disconnected. I mean, there's a million ways to do this without the way they did it. And I mean, that's fine. Like that's between him and Joe and how they wanted to be able to message this sort of thing. But I thought the very first thing was just an odd, like, of the messaging that they're going to do. That was an odd way to handle that messaging. And no, it did not inspire further confidence for me. And I'll also say, I wasn't there, right? I ended up listening to the transcript as well as reading the transcript because I just wanted to see if there was some differences. Sometimes when you hear things, it strikes you differently than if you read them, it's easier to do.
Be
that.
honest, John. You just missed me and wanted to hear my voice asking questions. You wanted to hear.
I missed everybody, and so I want to hear everybody's voice.
You wanted to hear what does it sound like when Aaron annoys someone else. I did plenty of that. But.
Well, that's why I listened to the whole Froming episode, to be honest.
Yeah.
But, for how much things might or might not change. And, I think primarily the message that was being delivered kind of behind, when you're reading was, I'm going to be more straightforward and in front of the press at delivering bad news than Joe was. Because, in terms of like whether or not there's going to be any real change, who do we think cut payroll 3 years ago, do we think that when that happened was like, oh, Joe Pohlad wants to cut payroll by 30 or $40 million?
No, I mean, I don't think Joe Pohlad was in charge of anything really. I mean,
Right.
he was
Right.
the public face of it, and I think they hoped down the road that he would take a more substantial view
Right.
or a leadership role. But I mean, this is a family business. They constantly say that.
That's right. And,
And
and and so who was in charge of the family business when they? I mean, one of the things they didn't say is, "Boy, we effed up by cutting payroll 3 years ago when
no,
we should have been
he
investing."
said that very clearly. Said that.
So you said that to Tom too, and that's why I read the transcript and why I listened to the transcript. I never heard him say anything like "we effed up cutting the payroll when we
Oh,
should have invested."
well, maybe it was when we
Maybe it
stopped
was a
recording,
sidebar
but
or something, but
I saw you said that on the news too because he did a bunch of TV stuff. No, he was very. But I mean, again, I get what you're saying, but it's
he was
difficult to.
he was in charge of the Pohlad companies when that happened.
No, he had. I mean, it's very clear this guy has nothing to do with baseball. I mean, like, it's not clear he knows players on the team and stuff like that.
No.
I mean, Tom, I'm talking about, not
Right,
Joe,
right.
obviously. But, uh, you know, yeah, I'm sure that he knew they were cutting payroll. But I, I get what you're saying. I just think it's very difficult, even that, to say, hey, we screwed up after 2023 cutting payroll. Can you phrase that in a very specific way that doesn't say the name Joe Pohlad and doesn't point it directly at Joe Pohlad? Well, sure. Can you say it in a way that people don't immediately just connect those dots anyway? Like it feels like to me what you're saying I don't necessarily disagree with, but it feels semantic to me. Like I don't think you're fooling anybody if you just don't say your brother's name. The first question is going to be 3 years ago, they touted this Pohlad as like the next generation of leadership. He was going to lead this team for the next 40 years. And now, 30 months later, he's being pushed out by his older brother. You can explicitly say that as he did. But even if you don't explicitly say that, I mean, who are you fooling at that point? I mean, it's not like we are like, oh, well, Joe must have really got a better opportunity. He stepped down on his own volition. Well, I mean, you'd have to be a complete idiot to see that. So, yeah, could you change the wording to soften it a little bit? Maybe, but I mean, ultimately the actions speak louder than any of his words. The guy got pushed out. And
Well,
whether you say he wasn't on board with it, which makes it very obvious he got pushed out, or you just dance around it and leave it to someone like me to go, well, what I know of Joe Pohlad, he didn't just step down. He wanted, I mean, we talked about this during the sales process. Like he was the one who didn't want to sell the team because he wanted to keep running the team. I think it's just a different way to get to the same destination. And here's the other thing. Let's take what Tom said for a moment as he said it about Joe Pohlad, at least the opening statements, which I do agree that it is very odd to begin your sort of reign over the Twins with a, hey, you guys were kind of mean to my brother, like that, But let's take that as genuine from him. How can you get that across where you're basically saying my brother was in a real tough spot? I don't like how he was treated, but it's time for a change. How can you get that across, other than just some semantic language? I mean, the truth is he took this job for life and was leaving it after 2.5 bad years. There's no secret involved in this. I mean, he stopped doing media interviews. People pretty openly talked about what a mess the team was on and off the field. Like, I don't know. I think to me, it might be a little column A, a little column B. And it didn't strike me sitting there in the moment of him sort of saying stuff that sounds nice in a way that would make it clear that he's not being nice. And believe me, I do that all the time. That is sort of my specialty. So I think I have a decent sense for that. You might be right that that's ultimately what it was. But I will add this context. We were told Joe Pohlad was going to be there, not on stage or not,
right.
At the podium, but that he would be there. And then he just never showed up. Derek Falvey never showed up either. And so who knows? And I do appreciate from Tom Pohlad's perspective, I don't know enough about him to say whether this was a one-day thing or not, but he did seem very willing to discuss. He got a lot of questions about not only Joe Pohlad, but like, what has this done to the family dynamic overall? And I have no idea whether he was being truthful or not with what he said, but what he said was very like emotionally heightened and very sort of peel back the curtain a little bit to show you some of the scars here. Now, that could all just be BS. I don't know that it's true, but he basically said like this put a tremendous strain on my relationship with my brother. This has been something that has sort of torn at our family here over the last several years. Maybe that's just a PR attempt. Maybe it's kind of a semantic, subtle way to toss the brother under the bus a little bit, like you hinted at. But it's at least to me an attempt for a Pohlad to be a human being as well as a billionaire, and we've asked for that over the years. And so when someone speaks like that and answers questions in what seemed like a somewhat genuine way to me, at least, well, you open yourselves up to getting your answers are getting read like we're doing right now and
Sure.
connecting the dots and we're reading between the lines. That's how it works. But I do think this to me was an example of him being superior at this job on day one than his younger brother was. Now that it's in a very sort of window dressing type of way. There's no winning the press conference or something like that. I mean, that's obviously, and by the way, I don't think it was that great of a press conference, but it was vastly superior to any press conference Joe Pohlad has ever done or probably will ever be capable of doing, because he sat in the pocket, he answered questions, he didn't say anything crazy, he didn't fumfer over every answer, and this is coming across as very mean to Joe Pohlad, which Tom Pohlad said we were being mean. I don't want to disappoint him in that, but that at least is a clear-cut example where you can be like, yes, it's just a different third-generation billionaire.
Right.
And trust me, I'm not expecting big changes here, and we can talk about that. They're not the things he said beyond that made it clear there's not going to be big changes, at least in the short term. But there is a change in terms of how they're presenting ownership, and I think for them at least, and this fans can debate how much this matters. I know when we've talked about this in the past, communication and the face of the team and all that, we hear from people all the time who says, who cares?
Right,
I don't care.
course,
I don't
right.
care what they say. I care what they do. And yeah, I mean, for sure, I care what they do. But what they say does drive a lot of fan morale, at least in terms of taking bad to worse. And I think that seemed to be his focus of like you said, if we're delivering bad news, and it's really been nothing but bad news for 3 years now for the Minnesota Twins.
Yeah.
There hasn't been a lot of good news to deliver, and that's their own doing. Ultimately, there's no good way to deliver bad news. No one's ever going to get fired from a job or told a loved one died and went, you know what? That really sucked, but it was just such great conversation with how they told.
Right.
And so part of that, but I think what he was trying to get at was this is day one of me leaving all the other business ventures. And I asked him that too.
Yeah.
I said, have you sort of divested from everything else? And he said, yes. He's no longer, vice president or whatever. He is just focused on the Twins. And it did seem to me that it was very important to them to make it clear he is different than Joe Pohlad. He is going to approach this differently than Joe Pohlad. And his goal in terms of media or speaking to fans is going to be basically a 180 from Joe Pohlad, or at least what it's been recently with Joe Pohlad, because the truth is Joe Pohlad has been out of sight. Right. And you can do that as an ownership group, but if you're out of sight and the team is falling apart, the morale is going to hit rock bottom rapidly. And whether or not better communication or more upfront communication from a different Pohlad is going to have any impact on that, my initial reaction is no, unless they actually make meaningful changes. So I'm not saying it's more important than actually spending more, making better moves, making better decisions, but you can sort of soften the blow a little if you have someone who can at least sit there in front of a camera or in front of a microphone and somewhat meaningfully answer questions. But to your larger point, he was pushed out. I mean, Joe Pohlad was pushed out. This was not his decision. That was clear from what Tom Pohlad said, but it's also just clear from how Joe Pohlad approached this job and the things he said. This was essentially his dream to run the Twins. And he got to do it for like 2.5 years, and it's one of the worst 2.5 year stretches in the history of the team.
And he prepared for it for a decade. You know, like he'd
Yeah.
been in the organization doing things,
19
being
years, they
coached
said.
up to it for almost 2 decades, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Before we talk more about the, more less semantic stuff from the, let's talk about our first couple of sponsors. One of which, Blackstack.
Blackstack Brewing. I've got an odd thing to talk about with Blackstack Brewing. I didn't think I'd ever be talking about this because I'm into the beer, right? Like I love the beer at Blackstack Brewing, and by the way, you're going to be able to try their beers from Blackstack Brewing if you attend the Winter Meltdown on January 24th, because they're going to be the official beer sponsor of the Winter Meltdown, just like they were last year, where they served up the Slopes Pilsner, the local 755 New England IPA. They pulled up that they brought their Pull Tabs Pale Ale. We also had the bonus Christmas cookie party where we had a whole variety, including a bunch of they have these weekly releases, and we had a number of their weekly releases, which were unbelievable. But I'm going to be talking about a non-alcoholic beer today that they offer. We mentioned their pilsner is called Slopes. You want to guess what their non-alcoholic beer is called, Aaron Gleeman?
Do I want to guess what it's called? No, I don't
It's
really.
called Nopes.
Okay.
It's like their Slopes Pilsner, only it's Nopes because it's their non-alcoholic beer. And here's why we are recommending it. It's because the owner of the brewery, Cooper, his mom, Shauna, or Shauna, with an E, her Uber driver recently, somehow they got to talk about Blackstack Brewing, and he's a listener of Gleeman and the Geek. And he was like, you know what you should have Gleeman and the Geek talk about? It's the non-alcoholic one because I can't drink, but I love Blackstack's Nopes. Their non-alcoholic Pilsner. So that's another one that they have. And I know that was actually, I know that was one of Cooper's focuses when I talked to him maybe a year ago about non-alcoholic beers, because he was expecting a baby, and he needed to. Everybody needed to be staying sober for that experience. So, Nopes is another thing you can check out all over the state of Minnesota. They've got this new distributor, so they are available from Grand Marais to Rochester, Winona to Fargo, Iowa, Wisconsin, North, South Dakota, Arizona, Washington, maybe Florida. You can find it. I'm going to look for it when we're at Fort Myers, or stop by their local tap room. It's one of the largest tap rooms in the state of Minnesota. And if you do that and you enjoy a beer on tap and then take a 4-pack home with you, you just mentioned the code word Gleeman and the Geek for $2 off a 4-pack. So, Blackstack Brewing.
Our next sponsor is Hims. And the way Hims works is if you're like John and I and you have less hair than you used to have, for instance,
Yeah.
you can go to Hims and they'll help you with hair loss, ED, weight loss, which I have more weight than I used to have. It's tough that it goes that way. You have less hair than you used to. It should be like they should be linked.
You
Like,
are correct.
yeah, I'm losing hair, but I'm way skinnier than I used to. No. And so they can send you direct to your door. And sometimes this stuff isn't things that you want to be
Right.
at a store asking for
Right.
necessarily. And they can send it in some nice packaging that doesn't have a bright light saying this guy's losing his hair or whatever else. And you can get simple online access to personalized, affordable care. Like I said, hair loss, ED, weight loss, a lot more stuff. Hims.com/Gleeman. That's HIMS, hims.com/Gleeman. All you have to do, you go there, you do your free online visit, you fill out a little bit of paperwork, and they can direct you to what you're looking for, what the best thing is. There's also just different versions of it too.
Right.
If you want to apply it, you can apply it. If you want to take it as a pill, you can take it as a pill. Like they can sort of fit it to whatever you're comfortable with. And there's also some package deals if you got a couple of things that you're looking to work on. So that's hims.com/Gleeman. Individual results may vary based on studies of topical and oral minoxidil and finasteride. Featured products include compound drug products, which the FDA does not approve or verify for safety, effectiveness, or quality. Prescription required. See website for full details, restrictions, and important safety information. That's HIMS, hims.com/Gleeman. Okay. Let's lay out like the very basics of the ownership stuff, just so people have an idea of what we're talking about here. So it's been 14 months since the team was put on the market for sale. It was pulled off the market after 10 months, which means it's been about 4 months since they then announced pretty quickly after that in like August of last year or this year, I guess, that they had sold pieces of the team to what they called limited partners. That's just another name for minority owners, basically minority investors. And then for the last 4 months, there's been a little information on them, this and that, but like for the most part, they've kept this pretty quiet to the point that I know a lot of people were like, "Did this thing fall apart?
Right.
What's the situation?" Now we always pointed to the owners' meetings or the winter meetings, which just happened, is like this thing does need to get vetted. They're not just going to let billionaires into the group without looking into their background, and then the league has to literally vote on it, the other owners. So it was maybe a little later than the timeline, but I think it was more just the overall secrecy of it that led people to be like, "What's going on here?" So they announced the
And how
morning.
long it took. Like it did. I mean, they'd been on that for 14. It had been almost a year that they were on the market, 10 months when they were on the market, where we heard just about nothing. The fact that the deal had already fallen apart once
Right.
also kind of added to skepticism onto what was actually happening. Then we get to the point where, well, we've got two new groups that are going to be minority partners, only to find out, well, it actually kind of feels like maybe there's three new groups. We're adding at least three new people to the board. Like, it's been an ongoing situation such that ongoing situation in a vacuum for the most, a news vacuum for the most part, such that yeah, you're forgiven for having skepticism about what this was and what it was going to actually turn into. It's pivoted several times.
So there's two groups coming in, one of which is described as like the Minnesota group, which is led by George Hicks, who is what's it, Verde Partners or something like that. He's the
Yes.
co-founder. Um, Obviously, we're talking about super rich guys. I don't need to
Right.
preface each one by that. But within that Minnesota-led group, and he's the face of it, we were told he's a lifelong Minnesotan. I think he was a Gustavus grad. Verde Partners is a local business that he co-founded, I believe. I think he was formerly with Cargill, which is
Yes.
another local place. And then we were told that he's a lifelong Twins fan and a season ticket holder.
Okay.
And then within that Minnesota group, which he's the face of, there's also what were described as other local business people who have sort of bought into that group. So they declined a couple different times to say what percentage of the team was sold or to whom. They declined to say the total capital investment that they're receiving. I expected them to decline that. But so we don't have those details. But basically, Hicks got a group together of a bunch of local people, and they bought a chunk of the team. And then there was a New York group led by Glick Family Investments, which sounds like a real mom and pop shop, but it's just a private equity creditor, whatever, and based in New York. And they did something similar where they put a group together and bought in. But then what we were told kind of last minute that you just referred to with a third angle on this was the majority owner of the Minnesota Wild, Craig Leopold, bought in independent from those two groups just on his own. But what I was told was that he bought in for a much smaller slice of the pie.
Sure.
And the Pohlads wanted to make it clear out of like respect to the people who bought these bigger chunks, just because Craig Leopold is the name any Minnesota sports fan is going to latch onto, and any Wild fan who's also a Twins fan is going to be excited by that probably. They wanted to make it clear his was more of like I'll get in on this versus like I'm buying in a real substantial stake. Now that can change obviously, but my initial takeaway on that was, none of them were at the press conference. I wouldn't necessarily expect them to. I mean, Leopold would be the one you'd want to talk to, and he has the smallest slice of the pie. But my initial, because, like you said, as this thing went on for months and there was so little information, you start to think about best case scenarios, you start to think about worst case scenarios, and private equity buying into this thing, that scares me a great deal because
Sure.
I've seen it in all walks of life where they come in and they just squeeze any money out and they just leave the empty husk of whatever they've done that to. Everybody out there can probably think of at least a couple of instances of that with the newspaper business, with retail places, all that. That was my fear, and Glick Family Investments is sort of one of those things. But what I at least felt somewhat reassured about in this moment was that the Minnesota group is season ticket holders, lifelong Minnesotans, that sort of thing. And then Leopold, while he's not from Minnesota, he's certainly invested in Minnesota sports
Sure.
through the Wild. And so
Right.
at least half or more of the minority ownership that is coming in has, significant ties to Minnesota, can be described as Twins fans, lifelong Minnesotans, all that stuff. Now, is that going to, I'm not naive enough to say bad things can't come of that,
Sure.
but it at least feels like, okay, they at least found people who care about the Minnesota Twins to, cover half of this at least. Now, who knows how that plays out, but
It might have been nice.
that wasn't a given.
Right. I mean, we'd never heard about, a board that makes decisions for the Minnesota Twins prior to this whole process.
Right.
It would, and then we did hear as part of this that they're going to have 3 new members on this board as part of the groups that are coming in there. It might have been nice to have some idea of what those bringing those 3 people who are going to be adding to the board or representatives from each of those areas that are going to be, helping guide the Minnesota Twins. And, it's clear that none of them have a controlling stake. None of them are
Right.
the main decision holders. It's also been stated several times that none of them have like a clear path towards full ownership of this, right? So it's not totally clear what they're doing other than just sort of buying in at a high valuation and, having some say in how things are going. It's also, the Twins several times referred to them as, being excited to have them join because they're going to help provide guidance for how the organization is being run. That they've sort of got a certain level of expertise. That's part of the reason you often take partners in to a business. And the biggest thing, which they also made clear over and over and over again, is that the money that is coming in is not being pocketed, is going to be used to pay down a substantial part of it is going to be paid down the $500 million worth of debt that the Twins have associated with them, which, has a couple of positive effects. The first is that, it allows you to take more debt back on if you want to take more debt back on as part of your normal business operations. And part of that is, and also it reduces the payments that you have to make generally for that debt that you have. If you have a $500 million debt and, you have to make, $50 million worth of debt payments on that in a year. If you lower that debt to $200 million, you only have to make $20 million of debt payments on that a year. And that gives you $30 million more in your budget or your profit, et cetera, to kind of handle.
Well,
It can, right. That's right. It can.
It's funny. Like, I get what you're saying, but for whom is that good?
Right.
It's only good for the team and the fans if that money goes back into the team. And it seems
exactly.
very clear
right.
for at least 2026. I asked them about this multiple. They're not doing that in 2026.
Yes, right.
And
yes,
it was also interesting to me that near the end of Tom Pohlad's press conference, he repeated something that Dave St. Peter has said to me over the years and that other Twins officials not on the record have said to me over the years, which is basically everyone keeps complaining that our payroll is too low. Our payroll is higher than it should be based on our revenue and has been for years.
Right.
And Tom Pohlad took it a step further and said, that's how we got $500 million in debt. And, we've been over our level of skepticism with that. How do you create $500 million in debt when the payroll is $125 million a year and you're getting $250 to $300 million in revenue every year, et cetera, et cetera. But setting that aside, that I think is the thing that is kind of percolating underneath in a press conference like this, or when you just talk to a Twins official. It's like they can put the good face on, and I thought Tom Pohlad did a pretty decent job answering questions. But you see these glimpses or these cracks in the armor where it just kind of slips out. And the messaging that slips out is, we're pretty good owners, and we're not getting credit for being pretty good owners. We've been piling debt on this thing, and everybody's been so mean to us, and my brother Joe especially. But, if you fans were more realistic, you'd realize that our $130 million payroll last year is way higher than it would have been if it. And to me, that's what's fascinating, is because on the record, off the record, in a situation like this where he's clearly trying to put, the best face on it, move forward, all that stuff, they cannot help themselves but to play a little bit of that martyr card of we've been piling on debt with this thing, payroll's been nuts, as if the fan base doesn't know the payroll. Like, it's such a strange thing. And ultimately, here is what I always say, and I've said this to Twins officials to their face. Feel free to crack them books open, brother.
Sure.
We'll believe you. Show it. Go ahead. And until you do that, all we can do is go off, Forbes or Spotrac or whatever the estimates.
Common sense.
Or we can use our brains and our eyes and our ears. Right. And it's just such a strange thing to be like, yeah, our payroll went from 160 to 130, and now it's probably going to be closer to 100. But if you guys really knew the details of this like our family does, you know that the payroll should be even lower. To which I say, open up those books or sell the GD team.
Right. Yeah.
Like, what you don't need to live your life up on the cross.
It's amazing what a disaster this it must be you running this team when you just ended up selling $300 million or $500 million or whatever you just sold to a bunch of other investors that were interested in joining it. Yeah, everybody can't wait to lose money on this thing, apparently. Yeah.
And the family itself cannot stop themselves from losing money.
Right.
They've been losing money, as they tell it, hand over fist. Yeah. Probably they'd tell you for the whole 40 years, and certainly the last 10 years, why don't you sell it? Oh, no, we desperately want to keep it. We want, and it's not because they just want to make the community better. Sell it for $1.7 million and go cure something in the community if you want. You know what I mean? Go invest that in the homeless situation or something like that. Like, there are things you can do. Go build a hospital. Do something. Mm-hmm. It is such a strange disconnect to me that no matter what kind of face they try to put on it, and no matter how long they hang in there and answer questions in a reasonable way, I thought that it's just boiling under the surface of like, if only you guys, fans were smart enough to know, if only you guys had a realistic view, you would feel so bad for this collection of billionaires who are just losing money hand over fist. And by the way, it's not because we've run the team into the ground. That's not why we're losing money. Because that's the thing. Is like they're upset that after 2023, when they spent $160 million and they made the playoffs and they won playoff games, that the attendance the next year was only a slight increase. It was still a shade under 2 million. What I want to scream every time that gets brought up is, you didn't give anybody a chance to care about the 2024 season because you immediately said, oh, by the way, you know how everyone's as excited as they've been in 10 years about this team? We're going to slash the payroll. We're not going to make a single meaningful move all offseason. We're going to dump salary.
And also, we don't know if it's going to be on TV.
Right. Yeah. It's not going to be on TV. It's not all this stuff. And then they come out on the end of it. And by the way, the team collapsed down the stretch that year. Right. Yes. Did not make the playoffs. And then they go, well, see, that's proof positive. We invested in the team. And then the next year we still didn't sell 2 million tickets. And it's like, it's such a galaxy brain view of the things that make fans happy or sad. But
this is ultimately my point, though, on sort of the change at the top of Joe for Tom, which is maybe there is, and in fact there is, there's more to leadership than just establishing a budget and investing in the team, right? And so perhaps Tom is going to bring those other aspects to the organization that Joe was not as strong as, right? There is the communication aspect. There is, being in front of the fans and answering the hard questions when things are not going well, and not just, as well as being in front of the fans and trumpeting and promoting the team when it is doing well. Those are not things that Joe was especially good at, and Tom might be better at, right? There is a certain level of leadership and storytelling that goes along with leading an organization. And it is, Tom might be better at that stuff. But ultimately what it comes down to is, you've got people to run the organization like Falvey and Dave St. Peter, right? And either you're changing those people or you're investing more in that stuff. And it's not clear that you're going to be doing in either one of those things. No real changes here are going to be made in the near future. Maybe, maybe in the distant future or something. Like maybe Falvey's under the hot seat more now with Tom over than Joe. But ultimately, this is just a change in which Pohlad is running the team, and it's still a Pohlad running the team.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, yes, I agree. I mean, if the last name's Pohlad, the first name matters little, in my opinion.
yeah,
But and yeah, to your point, I mean, he was asked specifically, like, yes, the payroll is clearly going down. Do you plan to at least invest further in the front office, in scouting, in coaching, and player development? And he did not say yes to
no,
that.
he said, I don't know. Yeah,
Yeah. And we've talked a little bit that it's my understanding, talking to people around the league, that the Twins have fallen back in that regard after
sure.
making an initial push under Falvey. And so, if you're not spending on the major league roster and you're not keeping up to speed with the big spending teams on the behind the scenes stuff, which is much smaller scale, for $5 million, you can do a whole lot more with that. Where is your advantage coming from? Where are you closing the gap with teams that have been more successful? And those sort of answers were disappointing to me. But I think, ultimately I agree with you that like it is all mostly just window dressing. I do think there is value in having a better spokesperson. But here's the other thing I'll say. We're talking about that from our point of view of like public facing, like when you stick a TV camera in front of them, or you ask them to go on a radio show, or there's a press conference.
Sure.
And I do think that's important because that is how most fans are experiencing ownership, right? But there's a equally big or probably bigger leadership component of the stuff we'll never see. Just they have hundreds of employees who work under whichever Pohlad is in charge. And what I will say is, you'd be hard pressed to find anybody who had negative things to say about Joe Pohlad as a person.
Sure.
And that's one of the things that Tom tried to make clear at the beginning, which
Right.
we talked about. But, people cried at the announcement that morning when he said he was stepping down. And I know people who have worked with Joe Pohlad with the Twins, obviously, but I know people who have worked with him in other lines of, in other mediums that he was in charge of going back a decade plus. And they all said the same thing. Just great person, genuinely cares about people, et cetera, et cetera. Now, if I told you I had a friend who everyone spoke of in that way, but they weren't particularly comfortable giving quotes and answering questions and being in front of the camera, no one would ever think twice and be like, well, they're just not a good person at that point.
Right, of course.
But unfortunately for him, that is a component of this job. And it doesn't have to be. And over the last year, they really dialed it back. But you get yourself in a spot where if there's no spokesman for the team and things are going poorly, there's no pushback narratively, so fans just sink as low as they want to sink. But then also there's a perception of they're hiding. They're not willing to answer questions. They're not willing to, show themselves when things are going badly. And it seems clear, at least we'll see how it plays out, that Tom Pohlad, his approach is going to be different than that. Now that's one of those things that's easier said than done.
Right.
That's a
It's
great
easy
thing to
on
say.
day one when you're taking over, and
Correct. So we'll see about that. I mean, he can't be worse, really, in terms of communication style or frequency. But to your bigger point there, I am in complete agreement, which is, 14 months, this team was either on the market, only to be pulled off, or then in a spot where they had announced there was incoming minority ownership without giving any details. 14 months. The team ultimately wasn't sold. It's the same family running it, and they made very clear they're still going to be in charge. It's non-controlling shares were sold. It's a different brother, but it's still third generation Nepo baby, which is, an issue. New money's coming in, like you said, but it's not clear to me that new money is actually going to help the on-field product any, at least in the short term. It's great for them. They got a whole bunch of hundreds of millions of dollars. They can wipe the debt off the books, but that only really benefits the team or the fans if that money then is invested in the team. It's not clear that's going to happen. And, new quotes, maybe a slightly more presentable, smoother talking Pohlad. Okay, whatever. But I mean, he was asked 10 different times. I probably asked him 3 different ways myself that day, Tom Pohlad, what's the payroll going to be? Are you guys trying to be competitive? I mean, to say he danced around that would be,
Sure.
he hurt his ankles. He was dancing around that so
Right.
much. And it's very clear to us that our suspicion going into the offseason is accurate, which they're touting a $7 million first base signing as like evidence that they're going to try when their payroll right now is under $100 million. It was 135 to 140 the previous 2 years and 160 something 3 years ago.
Right.
I mean, they are spending, I've cited this stat before, but even if it gets like 110 or 115, they will be below Metrodome era spending levels relative to the rest of the league. And so, I talked a little bit on the Patreon with Tom about how like relentless or relentlessly was a choice, clearly a word choice that either Tom Pohlad or whatever AI he was using to craft his statements chose. And it's just, that's one of those things where I thought he did a pretty decent job at the press conference for whatever that's worth, maybe not much. But that's one of those things, like I said, where it's like percolating under the surface where you just want to say, and honestly, I asked him this and then followed up with it, and I wasn't real satisfied with the answer. How can you use relentlessness when the payroll is 100 million? Yeah, right. And that is the thing
and how can you paint yourself as being generous when it goes back to what we were kind of talking about, what we were worried about in the beginning of the offseason, which is like, what if the 100 million is not where they want to stop? What if it's at 80 million? What if it's at 70 million? And that's why we spent the first month of the offseason wondering if Joe Ryan and Pablo Lopez were going to still be, or Byron Buxton were still going to be part of this team. And it's starting to feel like that was, in fact, a concern, that the bar that the Pohlads feel so generous in actually meeting is $100 to $110 million payroll, as opposed to an $80 to $90 million payroll, which is rumors we heard from within the organization, a month and a half ago, 2 months ago, that there was some thought process it was going to be 80 to 100.
It is interesting that they really do, and this is, off Joe Pohlad's press conference, like he really does seem to think that the act of not trading those guys is enough. Right. And so I asked him, and I wrote about this too. I said, you've talked a couple times about how the decision was made not to trade those star players, but do you worry that it's a half measure?
Right.
If you keep those guys, but you don't invest further in the team to surround them in other impact players, because then aren't you just the same team from last year, or aren't you just sort of wasting those star players? And, he initially talked a little bit about the trade deadline and stuff, but then he said to me, I do worry about that. And then he kind of pivoted into this kind of almost like bragging.
Yeah, I know.
He goes, you'll get to know me. I think he was royal we, not necessarily me. I don't think anybody there wants to actually get to know me. But He said basically, you don't know me that well. You'll get to know me. I'm a go big or go home guy. I'm not a half measure guy. And that to me is really what the disconnect boils down to, is that I have no doubt that the majority of billionaires, and certainly third generation billionaires, view themselves as go big or go home guys.
Right.
One group of people who cannot realistically describe themselves as go big or go home guys are the people who own the Minnesota Twins, because they have never once gone big and they refuse to go home. And so,
I mean, I remember exactly those statements from Joe back when he took it over, 4 years ago. Like he's a think big guy. Okay. Yeah. But
yes. But I do think that is almost an epidemic among the billionaire class, and is something I think they get away with, not even talking specifically about the Pohlads, but just billionaires. Think of them in your head. Oh. This idea that,
everybody wants to think that they're go home or big.
Right. But because, it's the cliche, you were born on third base, thought you hit a triple.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Because of that, you think it's like saying, I'm the league leader in triples.
Well, yeah.
It's like, well, yeah, you were born on third base. Because you have power within money, and because you have power because of your family name and the businesses and everyone knows who you are, you have lived your entire life thinking of yourself as a person who can make things happen, as a person who can affect the world, as a person who has a big name and a big shot locally. And that's fine. That comes with the territory of being rich and being in a family. But one thing they haven't done is go big with the Minnesota Twins. Right. They've had an average payroll once in the last 20 years.
That's right. Yeah.
Once.
Right.
And so that to me is another example of you can say all the right things, but just beneath the surface, they really do believe that they've been trying to go big with this thing.
Right.
And I don't know how you shake that out of an entire family. I don't know how you convince an entire family that either that's not the case, which is probably going to be impossible, but at least try to make them understand that nobody else views them in that way other than their immediate family, and acting as if is going to undercut any change in messaging or communication. Because if you go into it saying I'm a go big or go home guy, there isn't a single Twins fan who's going to take you seriously when you're saying that, because all they have seen is going home or going small, excuse me. And so that is one of those things. Somebody in the room,
especially 2 years after 2023, where you had an opportunity to quote go big, and by go big I mean like get to an average payroll level,
right?
Get to a Major League Baseball payroll. Like that's as big as we were asking for it to happen. And
yes, we want them to be a go medium guy. We don't even need it to be a go big guy, and they can't even do that.
Right.
So yeah, these are all examples of things where I have no doubt that they think these things are true. But to me, that's part of the problem, which is you cannot change like the inherent brain chemistry that leads to this, having lived your life as a third generation billionaire in this insulated family that has owned the Twins and been huge in the business community. They truly do believe these things. They truly do believe that they have been overspending. Yeah. They truly believe that they're all go big guys because they're big shots. They're billion. I mean, they are. They can do anything they want basically in life. But they're not big shots within the context of 30 teams all owned by big shots. Yeah, right. And I think that is kind of in a rare environment. And if we're being honest, that is the only environment in which Twins fans are looking at them through.
Right.
I don't care how many yachts they can own or what car they're driving. I only care. The only reason the Pohlads are in my life and in the lives of Twins fans is because they own the baseball team that so many people care about. And so that is the lens through which they are going to be viewed and judged. And so when you say we've been piling up debt because we've been going crazy on spending, and every fan goes, wait, what? Right. And when you say, hey, I'm a go big or go home guy, every fan who hears that is rightfully going to be like, what are they talking about? Go big or go home.
That's right, yeah.
And so that is something that I think.
I'm looking forward to seeing the go big.
Yeah, Josh Bell, you saw it. Josh Bell is.
Yeah, we did.
Before we go through a few of the other quotes here, and then we're going to actually talk about some roster stuff to
about Josh Bell.
Yes, about Josh Bell.
We started the show with. We have not gotten back to him yet.
we're gonna go huge with Josh Bell, an okay first baseman. Let's talk about our last couple sponsors.
Prize Picks.
Prize Picks, yeah.
Prize Picks, which is your fantasy football team is winding down. Maybe like Aaron Gleeman, your fantasy football year is sadly over.
Or maybe like John Bonus, you got destroyed by your wife in the playoffs.
Still got three games to play. The 3 players to play tonight. Aaron Gleeman, we'll see. They've got some chance. But you are looking for something else to show off what you know or what you don't know about your hot sports takes. I would just suggest that you check out Prize Picks and download their app, because what you will find out is that if you've got this football season is still going on, the NCAA football season is still going on, the NCAA basketball season is still going on, you've got hockey, you've got the NBA, and all of them you can find on Prize Picks, where what you do is you build a lineup of players and you just take a look at whether or not what their prediction is of how many points they'll score, how many rebounds they'll get, or how many assists they'll get, how many passing yards, etc., goals. Do you think it's more than or less than that? You select 3 or 4 of them that you think you've got that. You build your lineup from those 3 or 4 players, decide whether or not you're going to go with more or less. And as a result of that, you end up, either winning or losing on your hot sports take. And the best part about it is that they're basic. First of all, there's two things. First of all, occasionally they give you a real gimme. Like this last weekend, they did one for the UFC fight or the John Paul fight. I don't even know who's the boxing guy from YouTube. I don't know.
Let's spend a lot of time on this.
Anyway, but the other one is that You can actually do the stuff where you've got you put some money in, and as a result of it, because you're with Gleeman and the Geek and supporting Gleeman and the Geek, they end up giving you some money. So all you have to do is you download the Prize Picks apps today, and you use the code Gleeman, and you're going to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code Gleeman, Gleeman, to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, it's good to be right.
And our last sponsor is Factor Meals. The way this works, they just send you fully made food.
Yeah.
And you get to pick from a menu, changes every week. If you want to go vegan, vegetarian, meat heavy, kid friendly, they have all sorts of different combinations.
Right.
The menu is constantly changing. You pick what you want. They send it right to your door. All you got to do is heat it up. And it's good. They've sent it to us before.
Yeah.
We've both eaten it. It's good. It's quick. It's healthy, particularly if you want to lean into specifics and choose the really, really healthy options. And it's just super easy. And you can.
It's so tasty.
Yeah, and it's actually good. Like you'll want to eat it.
I don't know if they've got a Korean beef bowls right now or some Thai style coconut curry. Like they go off. This isn't plain stuff. This is imaginative, fun stuff that you're going to be excited to eat.
And you can eat smart at factormeals.com/Gleeman50off and use the code Gleeman50off, like 50 off, because you can get 50% off your first box plus free breakfast for a year. That's the code Gleeman50off at factormeals.com for 50% off your first box plus free breakfast for a year. This exclusive holiday offer won't last. Lock in your savings before the New Year rush. Offer only valid for new Factor customers with code and qualifying auto-renewing subscription purchase. That's Factor Meals, Factor, factormeals.com/Gleeman50off. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So I asked him pretty early on, what is your level of, how would you characterize your level of commitment in owning the team long term?
Yeah.
And
that was a short answer.
Yeah,
Very direct.
he looked at me like almost like, I don't know. And he said, we're in it for the long haul.
Yeah. We want to lose lots and lots of money.
Yeah. So I know some Twins fans are disappointed by that. That's one of those things where what else are you going to say on this in that sort of environment? Like, hey, we're hoping to sell the thing in 2 years. But he also said he wanted to make it very clear that the Pohlads are still in control. I mentioned the use of relentlessly pursuing winning, pursuing championships, which they used, which is just really odd when you have $100 million payroll. He was asked, and I think I might have asked about this exact question about relentlessly and all that stuff, because my point in the question, I'm just paraphrasing, was basically like, how can you say that and then have $105 million payroll? Like, how do you square that, or how should fans square those two facts? Which is, you guys keep talking about investment and relentlessly pursuing winning, and then everybody looks and, Josh Bell's the only move and the payroll's 60 million less than it was. So here was his quote on that. Tom Pohlad said, quote, I don't think that as the landscape, what I see right now, that we should put a significant investment in the team of 50 or $60 million. But I don't think we're far off from that. I think the hard work in front of us is getting people and fans to buy into this, to believe we are committed to a championship caliber investment and team. I would tell you that Rome wasn't built in a day. Now, I don't know what everybody's reaction to that. It wasn't like a crazy answer to give.
You can guess my reaction to that.
Yeah, this to me just signifies the disconnect that I was sort of getting at, which is to say Rome wasn't built in the day when your family has owned the team for going on 50 years. They're starting their fifth decade at the helm here. Is just, what do you want fans to take from that? Rome wasn't built in a day. I bet you they could build Rome in 50 years, probably. I haven't done my history lessons on that, but I also know some other things.
Tear down Rome in a day.
Yeah, I was gonna say, do we want to go along with that string and find out what happened in Rome after that? But the other thing of like, I think the hard work in front of us is getting people and fans to buy into, to believe. I get what they're saying, which is I took that as,
we're acknowledging that fan morale is horrendous right now. They're not wrong to think that, all this stuff that we've talked about. But my thing is, why are you trying to like almost trick them into believing something that isn't true?
Right.
Like
Yeah, right.
we're trying to get people to buy into and to believe that we're committed to a championship caliber investment and team. What have you done to show that? And that to me is like, you can do all the wordplay you want to do. You can go in front and do a million interviews, but the fans can look up the record. The fans can look at
Sure.
the roster.
Yeah.
The fans can look at the lack of moves you've made. The fans can look at the payroll. And it's like, a lot of what he said was logical and sensible to me. But I felt like, without pairing what they're saying, and that quote is an example, with actual investment or
course.
actually it almost seemed to me like it was not only like pointless to say it, but almost like did negative work to say it. Because if you're just talking a big game and you're not doing a single thing to actually show that you mean that, then what you're sort of conditioning the fan base to do is just not pay attention to your words. And then you're just back in the normal spot. Like,
Right.
it's very hard to improve communication, no matter how much of a focus it is. If you're sitting there saying, we got to get fans to buy into the fact that we are making championship caliber investments, you're not making championship
Yes,
caliber
right.
investments. And so
That's right.
what, I don't get it. Now, with that said, I think the part at the beginning where he said, I'm looking at the landscape where things are right now, and I don't think this warrants putting another 50 or 60 million dollars. That's not a surprise. But but again, I appreciate him answering that, I suppose, in a meaningful way. It's not shocking to anybody, but that is what fans are looking for. And it doesn't even have to be
Right.
50 or 60 million dollars. All he would have had to say to make some of these things connect more with fans in the moment was, we're going to keep the payroll where it was at last season,
Right.
which is 130
Right.
something million, which is still 30 million below where it was 2 years before that. But when you're not even willing to invest at that level or commit to that level or talk about spending at that level, it chips away at the viability of everything else you're talking about, because it seems like almost like a different reality, where it's like, we're
Yeah.
committed to this, we're doing this, we're going to show fans this. And it's like, have you started that yet? Oh no, maybe a couple years from now we're going to do that. Well, so hold this press conference a couple years from now.
Right. Yeah.
If you want to do that.
And then, I mean, to follow that up, one of the questions following it was, what do you have? What are your expectations for the team this year? Right. Well, we expect to contend for the AL Central Division Championship.
Right.
Well, hold on. I just said, didn't you just say we're not there yet? Like, are we not at the point where we can actually do this? I think he tried to make it clear that he is still learning about baseball, by the way, from somebody who was an MLB intern at some point.
For 1 year.
For 1 year back in, and he didn't make a big deal about it. He didn't say, "Oh, I really learned about Major League Baseball as an MLB intern," right? So how much he might have limited interest in what this baseball team is and where it is at and what the real situation is for it. I mean, for the record, I kind of agree. This team isn't ready to be a playoff, a World Series caliber contributor or contender right now. This might not be the time to sort of really boost your investment to the point where you're at a Major League Baseball average payroll. That's the $80 million, $90 million level you might need to get to really improve the team. But just so we're clear, first of all, you were there 2 years ago and you didn't, right? That was the day on which Rome you had been building to, and you did not invest in it at that point.
And by the way, it worked.
Yeah, and by the way, it worked. Yeah, and you should have reaped benefits from that, and you guys messed that up. And it wasn't just Joe that messed that up. That was a Pohlad family thing, which you were the CEO of at the time. So that was and then second of all, we're not necessarily asking for you to spend like the Red Sox or even the St. Louis Cardinals. We're asking you to spend a 3/4 of the Major League Baseball average to get to the point where that's how you build things. Like you could slowly invest in them. It's how you built up to 2023. You slowly invested up to 2023, and that $160 million payroll. You get them. You sign Josh Donaldson. You make a trade for Pablo Lopez. You make a trade deadline sell-off trade for Joe Ryan. We get how this is built. You're talking to a room of journalists that know how baseball teams are built, and that it is not an everyday thing. You just don't go out and sign three Bryce Harper and Manny Machado or whatever. We get how this works. You were there, you didn't do it, and now we're asking you to start taking steps towards that again. And the steps that you are giving us are, we're going to tread water with Josh Bell and pretend that we can contend for an AL Central championship.
Right. Which this is another thing that I've met with Twins officials over the years, which is they love to, with someone like me or you who are talking about payroll a lot and team building and all that, they love to go, well, what do you want? You want us to have a $200 million payroll? And it's like, no, we've never said that once ever.
Right.
Like, I mean, come on. But that is a cop out.
Right.
That is, and his quote about 50 or 60 million, to be clear, he's saying basically we're currently at about 100 million. We don't think, given the landscape of what we see right now, it would make sense to be at 160 million.
To be where we were in 2023.
Right. Now, I would argue they should be there because honestly, from 2023,
dropped off of there. Right.
Right. But nobody's saying that right now.
Right.
There's a massive gap between 100 million and 160 million. And to sit there and go, well, we're not going to be at 160 million. Okay, how about 125 million? How about 135 million? And that's another thing that people in this position do, which is they take the most extreme thing and they act like everybody's making an argument for that.
They're go big or go home people.
Yes, they're go big or go home people. And so, yeah, all this stuff, I don't think this is a negative. The change from Joe to Tom Pohlad. I'm a little more skeptical that ultimately the minority investments will be a positive, because I think once you start to go down that path, there's a lot of interesting things that can happen if the team stays in debt and all that sort of thing. Nobody welcomes minority investors when they're in a good position to do things. And I thought a lot of what he said, someone as we were leaving the room, another writer said to me, 70-30. 70% of what he said made sense and was pretty good. And then 30% of what he said, which we're, unfortunately for them, probably focusing a little bit more on today, had you scratching your head a little bit. But ultimately, and I think that's about what I felt. I felt to me, he's a much better representative for the team than Joe Pohlad. But then on the other flip side to that is, that doesn't matter to me if it doesn't come along with actual functionality changes, more investment, better investment, all that stuff. And to me, to roll this out after 14 months and to make the change in ownership, bringing people in, to make the change in which Pohlad is running the team at a time when the payroll is as low as it's been in 30 years relative to the league, and to basically be saying, don't expect anything beyond this. It feels like a missed opportunity, but it also, I don't think, paints them in a particularly good light financially, that they're on solid footing. Because if you have spent 14 months and really the last 4 months bringing in hundreds of millions of dollars in outside investors, and you're sitting there bragging to anybody who will listen about the valuation that you got, and that you got over almost on these people because you got hundreds of millions of dollars and you didn't have to give up control of the team.
Right.
And then it's like, well, okay, so you have all that money now. You've cleared the debt off the books. Surely now you have 2 months before spring training. Are we going to see some moves here? Like, this is a new era, right? Like, oh, no, we're actually going to cut payroll as low as it's been in 30 years. And then
in our relentless pursuit of a championship,
but we're going to act like we're not.
And be baffled by the fact that the fans can't connect to us.
Right. Now,
like,
it's tough. And, along those lines, he didn't really shy away from why fans are mad or that it's deserved. And I think that even, it might not sound like that big of a deal, but I think that even is appreciated. But these are small look, I mean, here's the truth. like I said, I only know the Pohlads. They're only in my life because they own the baseball team that I care about. And I'm sure 90% of fans feel the same way. And so, like I said, all this stuff is window dressing, and maybe it's slightly better window dressing. And maybe it's window dressing that has you a little more optimistic or a little less pessimistic about the people in charge. But no matter how nice the windows are dressed, if you walk into the store and there's nothing good in the store, who cares?
Yeah, right.
And so that is ultimately where I'm at on this. And here's what I think is going to happen. I think that they brought in the minority owners, which is going to be hundreds of millions of dollars in fresh capital, to pay down the $500 million in debt so that, to your point, they're not making these huge monthly or yearly, payments just to service the debt. I don't think they're going to reinvest in the team. I don't think they're going to go, well, we don't have to make those $50 million payments anymore. That's going to go directly into the team. I suspect the payroll for 2026 is going to be closer to 100 million than 130 million. I suspect for 2027, it's going to be similar. It's going to rise a little, but it'll be similar. But what they're going to do is they're going to get the payroll so low that you can't lose money, even with their bookkeeping methodology. You cannot lose money with $100 million payroll as a Major League Baseball team. You just cannot do it. And if you are doing that, sell the team to someone who is not the worst business people in the world. I think they're going to clear the debt. I think they're going to get the payroll low for the next several years so that you're not bled dry by payments. And then I think they're going to sell the team. And I think they're going to wait until after the lockout, when there's a new CBA in place. I think they're hoping that the CBA is a lot more friendly to small and mid-market teams, both in terms of a potential salary cap, salary floor, different luxury tax situations, the television deal distributing it more evenly between all 30 teams, or just a new revenue sharing where teams like the Dodgers are having to put even more money into the pool. Whatever the path to get there is, I think they're hoping that the next CBA for 2028 and beyond, or whatever it is, will be a lot more favorable to the Twins and teams like the Twins, so that interested suitors can view the television situation, view the other money-making situations, and be like, okay, there's a path here to make money consistently off the Minnesota Twins, which I'm not sure that many people saw that previously. And whatever ends in the Pohlads not owning the team is, in my mind, a good outcome. But the next 2 or 3 years, if I'm right that is their hope of bring in these minority partners, shed the debt, bare bones payroll so you can't lose money, bide your time until a new CBA, and then sell it in an environment where you can get $2 billion instead of $1.6 billion or whatever it is, that's going to be a not fun 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And by the way, I'm being somewhat optimistic in just saying they'll sell the team. It's also possible that they have no real interest in selling the team, and that everything I think is going to happen is true except for the last step, which is they brought in the minority owners, they shed the debt, bare bones payroll so you can't lose money, and then that's just life as the owners of the Minnesota Twins, where you're 24th in payroll every year and you're at 105 million. So where you can't, I mean, I'm sure they'll still claim to lose money somehow, but you can't realistically lose money because you're getting $250, $300 million in revenue. And that's not a great scenario either. The third scenario, door C, which is like the new minority investors come in, they infuse capital, you get rid of the debt. Okay, for this year, the payroll's bare bones, but then we'll start to build it back up. That would be great. And I'm not ruling that out as a potential outcome. I am not willing to believe anything until I see it at this point with this team and this ownership group and everything about it. And I suspect most Twins fans feel the same way, which is why I get that they want to be better at communicating and more upfront, but that has to be paired with doing the things that you say you're doing. Right. And they are just so far from that. They've strayed so far from that as just an overall concept of, being stewards of this team, that it's going to fall on deaf ears until they spend. And I am so skeptical that their payroll is going to rise in a meaningful way at any point.
One of the oh, I'm really skeptical of that.
Yeah.
The I you know the if the question is, do we expect them to get to the point where they are back to a, you know, within 80% of the average, which would be by 3 years from now, that gets them to $180 million payroll? I would say no, probably not. In fact, if anything, I wouldn't be shocked if next year's payroll is lower than this year's payroll, because they will have, because I think by this time next year we won't have Pablo Lopez on the team. We won't have Joe
Right.
Ryan on the team. There you're going to get some arbitration. I haven't actually done the payroll numbers to kind of see overall where it's going to be, but what would change the narrative would be, breakthrough performances by, some of the guys on the team and some of the guys not yet on the team. Walker Jenkins comes up, Wallner becomes a massive force. Brooks Lee, ends up becoming, the guys that we've been kind of waiting on the pitching staff totally breaks through, and we see, I mean, a lot of that could happen. At that point, maybe you generate enough excitement around the team to sort of, hey, we could, we're in the postseason. We can maybe win a series or two. We've got some fans kind of there. We can drive up season ticket sales like that. That to me is the path there. That has, I mean, I think that would be easier if they would make a $25 million investment in the team.
That's the
this
thing.
year,
All those
right?
things can come true. They're not hindered by
Right.
also bringing in other talent.
Right. No, that's true. I mean, I think a lot of that stuff would be more possible. I don't necessarily you know, I would love to see that happen. I'm not sure that is going to necessarily happen. We'll have to see. But in general, I mean, I think the overall strategy and philosophy here is going to be, by the way, it could go exactly the opposite way too. Like, I just want to call this out that, you know, the guys that we were hoping develop don't develop. The minor leaguers who get here this year are not ready to contribute in 2026 and are somewhat questionable for 2027 in much the way that we've seen. The pitching prospects that we've got in the deep rotation are in fact pitching prospects, and you just never know which way they're going to go. And suddenly the organization is what has been built underneath Falvey over the last 6, 7, 8 years, which they were hoping to be an engine for the future, is being torn down because Tom Pohlad is frustrated that the fans aren't into it because the team on the field isn't doing it, and that's where the next change has to happen, right? We've already changed the hitting coaches, we've changed the manager. The next change has to be front office changes, right? That would have to be it if things completely go the other direction. And by the way, he doesn't have the relationship with Falvey that
Right.
Joe Pohlad had, so that would be another direction that it could go. So.
He did talk a lot about accountability and all that
right.
stuff, and it's like, that's great. This is one of those things where it's great to say that,
Right.
and he might mean it, but we talked about this at the end of the season. Like, okay, you fired Baldelli, he was held accountable. There's no more room to wriggle. Like, there's no more wiggle room, I guess is what I'm saying. Like, you're at the level where the next step is the front office, like the person leading the front office. And yeah, to your point, I don't really know the relationship Falvey has with Tom Pohlad because Falvey didn't come to the press conference, but I do know Falvey and Joe Pohlad are extremely close. Right. Understandably. I mean, they worked hand in hand day to day for several years, and long before that.
I think Joe leaned on Falvey a lot.
Yeah.
So.
And, if this thing doesn't go well in 2026, and I'm personally not expecting it to go well, I don't know why you would. Like, I know there are a lot of Twins fans who are looking at projections and looking at all that, and I get it. Wait till next year. This every spring,
sure.
Hope springs eternal. I'm like that too. I'm gonna show up in Fort Myers. It's gonna be sunny, and I'm gonna think, okay, maybe. But the reality is, you've added nothing. Like, and we can finish on what they should be looking to add, realistically, but I don't think they realize the hole they've dug I think they realize they've dug a huge hole,
Yes, right. I think that's right.
but I don't think they realize like how extensive this is and what it will take to climb out of that from a fan standpoint. And it's unfortunate that like saying the right things is a positive step relative to the person he's replacing, but also no one wants to hear that stuff when you're not doing any of it. And
I mean,
you know,
it's easy to listen. It's always easy for the new guy, as somebody who's been a consultant.
yeah,
It's easy as a consultant to come in and say, "Boy, everything's effed up here," because that's why you were brought in.
right.
You were brought in because everything was effed up there, and ain't none of it on you yet, right? And so, it doesn't surprise me too much that he can talk tough about, oh, we really need to do this, we really need to do this, we got a lot of problems. Yeah, that's lesson one in how to come into an organization, right? Because you're the one who has nothing invested in it yet, right? You don't have, and none of it can stick to you. So that doesn't surprise me too much. But by the way, next month stuff starts sticking, and already payroll should be sticking.
Yeah.
Right. And we haven't seen anything there yet. So let's.
Well, and by the way, like if you to come in as a consultant and be like, I'm going to say, well, if your name is also the name of the company,
Right. Yeah.
it's a little trickier to pull that off. Too,
and you were the CEO of the conglomerate that oversees the company that's struggling here too, right? Like,
so in terms of next steps, my takeaway from the press conference was the payroll is not going to rise meaningfully from where it is right now, which is roughly 100 million. I think realistically it's going to end up where we've sort of been pegging it for the last couple months, which is like 110, 115, something like that.
yeah.
You've signed Josh Bell for 7 million. That checks one box. The questions that are left are you going to try to add another bat to play first base, which would push Josh Bell to DH, or are you just going to live with his bad defense a lot at first base? And then the real question is bullpen.
Right. Yeah.
Because I don't see it. Like, I don't think this team can even be remotely competitive without adding multiple somewhat dependable veteran relievers who have a track record of success. And I'm a believer in some of these young arms they have, but to count on them in 2026 forming the nucleus of a good bullpen or even an average bullpen, I just think is wildly optimistic. And it does sound like from the press conference and other stuff and people we've talked to, they are in the reliever market. But what I'll note here is I would say about 15 of the top 20 relievers have already signed.
Sure.
And now I didn't expect the Twins to land a top 10 or even top 15 reliever, but they, the pool is, a little shallower than it was 2 months ago. And, if they were never planning to go into the deep end of the reliever pool to begin with, that doesn't matter so much.
Right.
But also if they were never planning to do that, then we're just back at the same point where it's like, yeah, they'll sign a Danny Coulomb type and they'll sign who knows, a Josh Stalmont type or something, and they'll try to go forward. I'm looking for a little bit more investment in that, and I do think you're at 100 million now. You could sign a pair of $6 or $8 million relievers and still be well under $120 million payroll. To me, that is like the least acceptable path forward. But I'm just skeptical that they actually view it that way. But I mean, you got your bat in Josh Bell. I would argue you still need a first baseman if he's going to be your DH. I don't know that they feel that way. And then I would argue that you need minimally two. You need a closer and an eighth inning reliever, basically.
Give me an over-under on how much they will spend in 2026 on free agent relievers.
9 million.
Really? It's that low? You think it's that low?
I mean,
for the two guys that they're going to bring, you think it's going to be under 9 million, or over or under about 9 million,
something like that. Yeah, I mean, I think
interesting.
You could have a 6 million guy.
I expected a higher number from you. I think that number has come down in your mind over the last month.
Yeah, I mean,
I might go over that. I might go over 9, but I would go under 12.
So many relievers have signed.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's been a cheap reliever market, but there's been bunch of them where I'd have been like, that would have made sense for the Twins.
Yeah. Right.
And they haven't even really been reported to be linked to any of these guys, which makes me think they're taking their usual MO of let the market completely play out, swoop up, try to get somebody for $3 million or something like that. I don't know. I go big or go home. Okay. We want to
Is that be the name of the episode? Maybe.
Yeah. I just thought meet the new boss.
Okay. That's good. That's good. All
right. Thank you to our sponsors. You have Factor Meals, you have Prize Picks, you have what else? Hims
Hair.
And of course, Blackstack.
Blackstack, who's now being distributed to all of Greater Minnesota. So stop by your favorite liquor store, the Blackstack Tap Room, to grab your favorite brew or try something new. Or stop by the Winter Meltdown. Put that on your calendar. We'll get you details at twinsdaily.com, January 24th. We've been talking with the Twins about who our special guest might be. Aaron is optimistic about our special guest, which is something I've never seen from him about a special guest. Last 2 years I've been berated about my.
I'm not optimistic. I've been told to be optimistic by the Twins.
Okay.
And then lastly, we mentioned it, but go sign up for the Patreon.
Oh yeah, right.
And if you are already, or you want to give it as a gift, or you want to switch from monthly to yearly, 20% off year-end sale now through Christmas. If you're already subscribing, you might as well get the 20% back. You get 2.5 months for free.
Right.
It's a great gift to give to a Twins fan in your life that requires no delivery. And let's be honest, if you enjoy the show, it is the best possible way to show support in that you are signing up for things we're selling. Right. And if you give it as a gift, you are bringing in new audience members for us. So
exactly right.
We'll be thankful for that.
If you feel cheated by you didn't get enough Josh Bell talk, I guarantee you we've got a good hour and a half of Josh Bell talk. That's only a week old. All you have to do is check it out.
There's probably about 8 hours of content on the Patreon side from the last 7 days or whatever. So go over patreon.com/Gleeman, and we will talk to you next on the Patreon side later on this week.
And also, if you are listening to this via podcast, we should also mention YouTube. We also got the YouTube channel.
I don't feel that handsome today. I don't want people looking at me. I'm sick. I don't.
Actually, save yourselves, people.
Yeah. Goodbye.
Bye. And welcome to the end of this video. There's lots more. For another, just click on one of these boxes.
Or click on this circle in the middle to subscribe to all of our Twins Talk.
Thank you.
Gleeman